All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the story that honestly starts out feeling like this whimsical urban fantasy, but then it just completely morphs into a suspenseful thriller. We're going to look at how a seemingly magical book hunt, the kind complete with mysterious messages and quaint little bookstores, actually turns out to be a meticulously laid trap. It's an absolutely brilliant study in perspective and hidden motives. So I really want you to keep this exact question in the back of your mind as we go through the narrative. We are looking at a fascinating case of dramatic irony, where two completely different realities are about to collide. Because on one hand, we have a guy who genuinely believes he is following the magical breadcrumbs of destiny. But on the other hand, we have a predator who has carefully placed those very same breadcrumbs. Section 1. A mysterious invitation. All right, our story kicks off with Larry, an optimistic book lover who wakes up one morning and discovers something that, frankly, should be impossible. Let's break down exactly how Larry's morning actually unfolds. He wakes up at 8 a.m., about an hour late. By 8:15, he goes to check a note he had left inside a rare book he recently bought. And to his absolute astonishment, the text on that note has physically changed overnight. What's wild here is how quickly Larry just accepts this impossible, magical notion that a book can somehow send and receive messages. By 11:30 a.m., totally fueled by the sense of wonder, he's in his car, and by noon, he arrives at his destination. And here is the hook that sets Larry in motion. The original note he left inside his copy of a book called McConnell's Odd Science Curiosities has been completely replaced by this new message written out in this stylish cursive. It gives him an exact name and a very specific address. Now for Larry, this isn't a red flag. No way. It's a personalized invitation to adventure. He feels this deep sense of satisfaction, truly believing he is right on the verge of locating a companion book he's been desperately wanting. So Larry eagerly drives 22 miles out to Port Williams, and this setting is absolutely crucial for the atmosphere of the story. It's a town of about 15,000 people. It's a former mill town, one that actually cranked out typewriter paper all the way up until the year 2000. Today, the old mill just sits there, mothballed and empty. It provides this perfect, slightly melancholy, historic backdrop for a guy on a literary quest. It feels exactly like the kind of place where old secrets might just be hiding out in plain sight. Moving on to Section 2, the bookstore encounter. Boom, it's noon. Larry pulls off Water Avenue, parks his car, and steps into what feels like an absolute sanctuary. The bell jingles cheerfully, and he is instantly enveloped by these towering shelves. The vibe inside this shop is just peak cozy. It smells of old paper, leather, pipe tobacco, and just a hint of sweet incense. I mean, it's exactly what an antique bookstore should feel like, right? Here, Larry strikes up this polite, really charming banter with the proprietor, a guy named Gideon Jarboe. Gideon's sitting behind a century-old, dusty counter, rocking a gray beard and comfortable glasses. It all feels wonderfully serene and safe. Guided by this quiet, focused determination, Larry wanders back into the poorly lit esoterica section. And there, tucked between a book on Victorian funeral rites and some forgotten poet's biography, he finds his prize. It's a slim volume with faded gold script, a genuine 1870 first edition of Modern American Spiritualism. He brings it right up to the counter, his heart is racing, and he asks Gideon to confirm its authenticity. Now, what is super interesting about this interaction is Gideon's sales pitch. He doesn't pitch the book as some collection of cheap thrills or spooky ghost tales. Instead, he frames it as a primary source of living history. Gideon explains that the author, Emma Hardinge Britten, was actually an insider, documenting the American origins of the spiritualist movement right at its absolute peak. He totally sells Larry on the historical gravity of the text, perfectly validating Larry's whole quest. Gideon asks for $300, which, yeah, is a steep price. But for Larry, the immense satisfaction of completing what he genuinely views as a magical, destined journey completely outweighs the cost. So he happily pays the $300, takes his book, wrapped really carefully in tissue paper and a plain brown bag, and heads for home. He's totally convinced his adventure has reached a successful, heartwarming conclusion. Section 3. The Seller's Secret. Okay, the exact second that cheerful little bell jingles and Larry leaves, the cozy atmosphere evaporates. We have to completely shift our perspective now, because that magical book hunt we just followed, it was a total illusion. The reality of what just happened is much darker and incredibly calculated. Here is the absolute wild part. Gideon Jarboe was playing completely dumb the entire time. He knew exactly who Larry was the second he walked through the door. The whole transaction, the polite banter, that thoughtful pitch about living history, it was all a beautifully rehearsed game. And the stakes for Gideon are far, far higher than just an extra $300 in the cash register. Just think about the stark contrast between these two realities for a second. For Larry, he is the hero of an adventure guided by a mystical, changing note. But for Gideon, this was a cold, calculated trap. Gideon didn't just happen to have the book Larry wanted. He specifically placed that 1870 edition out in the open as irresistible bait, just waiting for Larry to bite. To really get why this is happening, we gotta rewind a bit to Gideon's backstory. A while back, Gideon made a furious mistake at a local garage sale. He spotted the rare copy of Spiritualism and eagerly bought it, but he completely neglected to grab its sister book, McConnell's Curiosities, which was sitting right next to it. When he realized his error and rushed back, he was too late. The organizer told him a skinny, spectacled man had just bought it. And, yep, that man was Larry. Section 4. The True Stakes. So this obviously begs a massive question, right? Why is Gideon so unbelievably obsessed with this specific customer and these two seemingly unrelated, dusty old books? Why go through all the trouble of recognizing a random guy from a garage sale and setting up an elaborate psychological trap in a bookstore? Well, the answer is the Clarence Richards collection. These two books are a set, not because of their authors, but because of their shared lineage. They were both owned and likely signed or annotated by a famous local book collector named Clarence Richards. Together, as a verified set, their value just skyrockets. Gideon knew that once Larry researched his copy of Curiosities and saw the Richards connection, he would definitely come hunting for the matching volume. Gideon completely relied on that predictability. Right after Larry leaves, Gideon heads into his back room, this cluttered, hermetically sealed command center, lit up by a glowing computer monitor. Sitting in his threadbare armchair, his inner monologue reveals this chillingly cold certainty. He whispers to himself, "So, Larry, you have the Curiosities at home, and now you have Spiritualism in your bag." He isn't upset that Larry walked away with the book. Actually, scratch that. It's exactly what he wanted to happen. Gideon is an absolute pro at research, and his next steps are, frankly, chilling. He's going to systematically search local property records, cross-reference public directories, and pinpoint exactly where Larry lives. In Gideon's twisted mind, the books aren't lost to a paying customer. They're simply gathered together in one highly convenient location, just waiting for Gideon to come and take them. And wow, that brings us to the end of this explainer, leaving us with a terrifying shift in tone. We started with a cozy, magical book hunt, and we end with a targeted, highly calculated stalking. The trap worked flawlessly. But as Gideon maps out his route to Larry's house, we really have to ask ourselves, just how far is this proprietor willing to go to complete the Clarence Richards collection? It definitely makes you wonder who exactly you're dealing with the next time you step into a quiet, dusty antique shop.